there, Internet Wanderers! Welcome to Real Psych. I am Dr. JD Barton, and I am a licensed clinical psychologist.
And I am Dr. Joanna Whitkin, and I am a cognitive neuroscientist.
Real Psych is a new podcast where we share our gorgeously thoughtful opinions on the psychological phenomena playing out in all of your favorite movies.
JD, will there be learning? Will there be science? Will there be delightfully informal, explorational, informational conceptualizations from two best friends who would be talking about this anyways?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There will be.
Sometimes I feel like with the intro, because I am not an actor, that I feel myself like I in a high school production or something. I'm hit that, enunciate, and it's like not. It's so forced. I'm not good at speeches.
Hey, you're doing great. You have a following on a podcast.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's definitely me.
Apex.
It's the charisma I bring.
Apex living is peaked at podcast.
My undeniable charisma. I have that it factor, you know? I mean, if I like the feedback that I get generally, consistently, always, I just got that it factor, you know? Yeah.
It. That's what they say.
Everybody says that.
I don't
famously.
know what it is, but you got it, girl.
You got it, kid.
You got it, dude. Coming out the years. How you been?
Good. Just good. Everything's good.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's like being cute in fall, and that's nice.
It is being cute in fall, and the weather's really nice.
Mm-hmm.
Listeners, we're on the same time zone.
Wait, where are you?
I'm in Michigan.
Oh my gosh. That's why your background. Okay, I didn't know if you were like, I don't know.
Yeah.
You just don't ask questions.
Don't ask questions you don't already know the answer to.
We're talking from wooded areas.
Yeah.
In homes with lots of wooded accents.
Listen, wooded accents are the least offensive accents.
Yeah, our backgrounds are literally like wood and books.
Wood and books.
Yeah.
It's that double O's.
Those double O's.
Those double O's. We could make cute little smiley faces out of both of those words. Yeah, I'm in Michigan. I went to a wedding this weekend. That was lovely for my my new cousin that I didn't know existed. I mean, I kind of knew she existed, but like we're now friends.
Yay.
And it was a lovely wedding, and it was really fun. And the weather here is gorgeous and crisp and fall, but also warm. It's like 70 degrees, but the trees are orange.
Yeah, that's a great spot to be in.
It's very nice.
You do have to dress flexibly all the time.
Listen, I always have layers. That's like my whole personality is like carrying a sweater.
It's like an onion. Layers. Yeah.
Because if you get to the middle, it stinks. I don't know why I did that horrible voice. I'm not used to recording so late. It's 9:52. Yes,
and I thought you were on West Coast time, so I was like, it's just me that's suffering.
No, it's fine. It's fine. When you suffer, I suffer.
Yeah, because it's still before my bedtime.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, so.
Should we so y'all, we have a new format.
Yeah.
If you may have noticed on the last episode, we already told you what this week's episode is gonna be. And then at the end of this episode, we're gonna tell you what next episode is gonna be.
Yeah. And if you forgot, you can just look at the title of this episode and it's a clue.
That's right.
And now I mean, there's a part of us that's like, why didn't we do this earlier? But I think, we're learning, we're going along, but this is fun because you get to guess with us, audience. Yeah. And we get to do everything in one little shot. So
we could do everything in one little shot. So we get to talk about this movie, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll tell you all the research about this movie.
Yeah.
while I was watching this movie, Joanna, which I love this movie. I love this movie so much. This movie, there is a joke every 10 seconds in this
Hmm.
movie.
It's
It's so
jam-packed.
funny. But the idea of synopsisizing this movie,
It's yeah, I wasn't quite sure because I also love this movie. I've seen it a bunch of times. It was wonderful rewatching it, but I also am having a hard time pinpointing what happens because it's like everything
I
all the
mean,
time.
okay, so this cast,
It's a good
crazy.
cast.
You got your Tim Currys, you
Hmm.
got your Leslie Ann Warrens,
You're
you got your
Madeline
Madeline
Kahn.
Kahns, you got your Martin Mulls,
You're Christopher Lloyd.
you got your Christopher Lloyds. I always forget it's him, and then it starts with him pulling up in the car, and I'm like, oh my God, that's Christopher Lloyd. It's the
Yeah.
Page Master.
Yeah.
Always shocks me. Um, and many other people whose names I don't necessarily know. Um, legends in their own right.
Yes.
So this game is based on a board game,
Which I also love.
which of
It's
course,
so good. I have to like dig it out of my parents' attic. It's
exactly
somewhere.
with a body.
Yeah.
Um, and so this movie is based on the board game, the Milton Bradley or Parker Brothers. I should know, which
Eh,
I don't care.
same div.
It's based on the board game, which is just a cute thing, anyways. Like, nice try, Jumanji.
Well,
This
yeah,
thing's
I mean,
real.
and it essentially, well, yeah, there's like the whodunit part of it, which is part of the board
Mhm.
game, and then also the setting, right? So there's like all of the different
Rooms,
potential weapons, or like what are they called? Murder weapons
murder
and
weapons,
rooms.
and
Yeah,
rooms.
and so that's all like familiar from the board game.
Yeah. So, um, this movie, I also was really mindful that I was like, wait a minute. This is one of two films where people come into this weird old house and Tim Curry takes them on a strange adventure.
He was like
It's full
having
Rocky
a moment.
Horror
Yeah. Yeah.
in the stormy night. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, wait a minute. This is the same thing. It's different. It's different.
It is
No
different.
one is aliens in this movie.
Yeah.
Anyways, so the synopsis for this one's kind of funny because we're not gonna do a a, a beat for beat
It's impossible.
recap.
But essentially, these seven strangers are invited to dinner.
Yeah,
They receive
Miss
these
Peacock,
anonymous notes.
Mrs. White, Colonel Mustard, the butler,
Mr.
um,
Green.
Mr. Green, is that one of them?
Yeah, that's Mike McKean
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, him.
or Michael McKean.
Michael McKean.
Yeah.
Uh and who was who was the professor?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Christopher Lloyd as the professor, I think.
Professor somebody.
Somebody. Mrs. Peacock. Did I
You
say
said
her
that.
already?
Mrs. Peacock. Professor Plum. Is that
Professor
right?
Plum. That's it's not the professor, it's Professor
Yeah.
Plum.
And green, white, mustard.
There's the old lady.
That's Peacock.
Oh, who's the sexy lady? Miss Scarlet.
Ah, Miss Scarlet. There you go.
Boom. There we go. So all these people are brought together on one stormy night.
Mm-hmm.
And the butler, played by the incomparable. What's his name? I've
Tim,
said it nine
Tim
times.
Curry.
The
Unforgettable.
unforgettable. I was like, man,
I thought you were pausing for dramatic effect, and I was like, "You're doing it. You did it.
no,
It's
I just
dramatic."
forgot. I just forgot. Um, the unforgettable Tim Curry. They're brought together and they're all sort of on edge because they all got a letter.
Yeah, these anonymous letters are from Mr. Who's it?
Mr. Body.
Mr. Body. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, they don't know who they're from. They just know
right.
to come.
Mm-hmm.
They all sit down and start having dinner, and Tim Curry, not Christopher Lloyd, Tim Curry is like, sit down, you'll all know what happens shortly. And very quickly it comes out that they bring in Mr. Body, and they're all sort of talking around not talking about who they are. They're not
Mm-hmm.
really identifying themselves. They know they have these pseudonyms that they've been
Mm-hmm.
given. And uh they then say that they're all being blackmailed.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course they all say, and the person blackmailing you is Mr. Body. And Mr. Body is like, What are you doing? What? And he tries to get out of there. And then dun dun dun, he's dead.
Yeah,
The
at
lights
least.
go out.
So Mr. Body is like, oh, so Tim Curry says, I've called the police and they're going to be here in 45 minutes. So we'll, this is, it all comes to an end. Here's all,
Yeah,
whatever. Mr. Body is like, I got you presents. And he gives every person
that's
a
right.
murder weapon.
Oh
And
yeah.
then is like, if you kill the butler, Tim Curry, then we can all just skedaddle and everything will be fine. And then he turns off the lights. There's a gunshot. The lights go back on. And Mr. Body is on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly
So
what happened.
that's
I'm so,
what happens.
I'm so
And
glad.
then they're all like freaking out because they think he's dead.
They think he's dead.
And then
Well, no,
the
he is dead, Joanna. Don't spoil it.
I mean, he's not dead.
He's actually
He's
not dead. But then they go
yeah,
into another room and then
because
they
the
find him.
maid is screaming,
Yes.
and they go to console her, and she's just recording like the conversation for I don't know proof purposes, and then she's just scared, and then they're like, "Oh, where's the cook?" And they go into the kitchen. The cook's dead.
And the cook's dead.
Yeah.
So now it becomes this whodunit of like
Hmm.
they don't know who's killing people. They
But
don't know
people
what's
are
happening,
dying.
but people are dying.
Yeah.
And I mean, truly, to go through this point by point would literally take 90 minutes. So suffice it to say, at one point, they're all running around trying to figure this out. At one point, a police officer comes in
Hmm.
and they're all like, oh, scared and hijinks. There's so many puns in this movie, you guys. Like everything is like it's like a combination of puns and like Amelia Bedelia, where it's like they say
Yeah.
something like they say something figurative and people take it literally, and it's like look, look, hijinks. It's all
Everyone's
going,
like running around,
yeah,
screaming,
screaming,
uh
running,
yeah, suspicious, scared, but in a fun way.
yeah.
And basically, yeah, there's like a motorist that shows up, there's a
Yeah,
police
motorist whose
officer.
car who's out. There's a there's a at one point in 1 second in one like fell swoop, the maid gets killed, the cop gets killed. Is that right?
Yep.
And
And
then a singing telegram, a singing
yeah.
telegram gets killed, all within like the span of about a minute.
Hmm.
And of course, this is while like power outages and lights breaking and different things, and people getting locked in rooms and trap doors. And it comes to this end. I mean, we're truly the only way to explain it. So it comes to this end, and because of the way the game works, they do this movie in such a brilliant way where they actually tell you, is it 3 or 4 endings?
I think it's three endings.
It's 3 endings. And Tim Curry does this amazing thing where he like and walks through like all the different things that have happened all night. And he's like, and of course, this is what happened. And then we go into the bedroom and then blah,
Oh
blah, blah.
yeah.
Right. He's like, and they all follow him and they're all like hanging on his every word. But they tell these different endings of who could have done it.
Hmm.
And the third ending is they all did it in different ways. Like each one of them has committed a different murder at
Yeah.
some point in this night. And then of course it ends with the FBI or the police coming in. They
Well, the
all are
big
under
wait, but there's
arrest.
like the big twist, which is that Tim Curry is actually the guy who's been
Oh
blackmailing all
yeah.
of them, and he orchestrated everything. And then Michael McKean, Mr. Green,
Yeah.
uh, who, well, there's a whole like he's a homosexual, like that's
Yeah.
literally his
There's
his
this
whole
whole
thing.
theme through the whole movie is that Michael McKean is gay, and that's the thing that he's being blackmailed about.
Yeah.
And there's the ending to the last line of the last like reveal is Michael McKean going, all right, sir, well now I'm gonna go home and sleep with my wife.
Yeah, it's just like yeah. Of the
It
time, I guess. I don't know, but
it's I mean, I don't find it offensive. Like I think the bit is kind of fun, especially of the time. It's 1985. He's secretly a homosexual. It's like silly, silly, silly. They have a bunch of great moments where it's like the hot maid and it's like I'll search like all the straight dudes are like, I'll go searching with you. And he's like, I won't. And he like walks away.
yeah,
There's like a few
okay.
cute like moments of like
Yeah.
him just like being gay. I don't feel like they make his queerness like uh anything other than just something that some people like they it feels very face valid, the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like the don't ask, don't tell. He has a government job, like that's his
Yeah.
whole.
Yeah, and
I
so
just
like at
feel
the
like
time you
the
could
other
blackmail somebody for it.
definitely the other people have like more scandalous things to, or not scandalous, but like actually
I
bad
mean, one of
things that
them
they've
runs a
done.
brothel.
Yeah. Well, but she's also like has all these secrets and
Well,
bribing
yeah, that's what you
cops
find
and
out is like she sells
yeah,
secrets. But like, yeah, Miss Scarlet I mean, of course, because the Scarlet Letter, she has a like she's what's
she's
the
a
word?
business lady.
She's the
She's a
oldest profession in the
madam.
world, a madam. Thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Anyways,
so
but yeah, so
the
that's
movie
how it ends.
ends. They all did it, but also like there's different options. I think, and I'm totally this is anecdotal memory from like a thing that someone once said to me, but I think when they initially released this in theaters, they only did one ending in each theater. So like in different like you had to go multiple times to see the different
That is
endings.
genius.
Yeah, I think.
I hope that's the case.
I hope it's the case too. This could have been Googled, but I researched other things for this podcast.
Yeah.
How before we get into our research and everything like that, like how did you like how was watching this movie for you?
Oh, it's just fun. Like it's such a good movie and it's really entertaining. And I yeah, I watched it like on last Friday night and it was like a I don't know, it felt like a an event that you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like it's not like, oh, sometimes some of the movies I'm like, okay, I gotta watch this movie. This one was like, this is what I'm gonna do with my Friday night
Yeah.
because it's like entertaining and
Yeah.
fun.
I watched this one real early. Like I watched this one I think on like Thursday, which like
Yeah,
we're recording this on Monday. So normally
right,
I watch on like Saturday, Sunday and we record
right.
on Monday. Yeah, I watched this one really early.
Because it's
It's
just
such a fun
fun.
and it's a great like Halloween watch because it's like
Yeah,
kind of a spooky little like, stormy mansion kind of vibe.
totally.
Yeah, I love it. This movie is I like every time I watch it, but especially this time because I was watching it so intentionally. Like it's just so funny.
It
This
is.
movie has so many hilarious lines.
I
And
mean,
what's
I was
funny,
waiting for the Madeline Kahn, the
yes,
flames
flames,
on the side of
flames
my
on the
face
side of my face. Yeah, she just is
the whole time.
so
I forgot that it happened like one of the last
it's in
minutes
one of
of
the
the
endings.
movie.
It's in the
Yeah.
very last ending, I think, right? Or one of them. It's in
One,
either
it
one
was
that
one
she
of
did
them.
everything,
I think
but
it is the last ending. Yeah.
yeah. Um, it's so good. And
It
it
is
like
so good.
and yeah, it just like the lines, the puns in this are so just unending. And it just
Yeah.
like you just the humor of it all just doesn't stop. And even just little cute moments of like at one point while they're explaining what's happening, the lights go out and then Tim Curry's dead on the ground and then the lights come back on and then he keeps explaining what's going on. You're like, oh, he's not dead. He just is like doing bits.
It really
Um,
is like just a mile a minute. And I feel like it's a very contained cast and the
yes.
setting is very contained. Yet
Yeah.
I was like, there's not 1 minute where I was like looking at the time because it just like is just nonstop.
And it's some of the best character actors we've ever
Yeah,
had, and they're
totally.
all in one cast. So this is, I
Totally.
mean, there's a reason why this movie that's about a board game in 1985 is like such a classic that like you and I in our spry young youth years are still happy to watch as we yawn our way through 10 p.m. um, but yeah, I love this movie. Um, and it is a movie that, to be honest, it there's not a lot of people of color in this movie. I think the police officer is the only one.
hmm
Other than that, I don't know that there's a lot that like we that I watched and I was like, rut-row. I mean, we've watched so many movies and we go back and we're like, eesh. But like, I don't know that there's a lot that like struck me as like, oh no.
Yeah, no, nothing that like I wouldn't still see in movies today, I guess.
Yeah, like it doesn't it's aged well is what I'm trying
Yeah.
to say.
Yeah,
And that like
yeah,
it was not the jokes are not playing on like even the gay jokes I didn't find playing on like stereotypes in any
yeah.
way other than like oh he's gay, which means he has sex with men, which means he's not interested in having sex with that woman. Okay? Like
Right,
that was like
right.
yeah, so it never feels like yeah, it just is such like clever silly even like Miss Scarlet. I mean, we've gone off on how we support sex workers on this podcast. Even like Miss Scarlet as like a madam is like not like this disgusting, depraved, like you know what I mean? It's got kind of a fun.
What I like too is that she's like very dimensional aside from that. Like she's like an ambitious
Yeah.
businesswoman and like
Yes.
her business happens to be sex work, but that's not like
Yeah.
her whole and she's pretty sexy, but like, you know.
But, you know, it was funny is for a second I thought you were gonna say, and she just happens to be hot. I thought that's what you were gonna say. It
No,
just
that's yeah.
as fate would have it. That is one of the weirdest. It always feels so microaggressive when people say just happens to be and then they like name something. It's like, no, you're my friend and you just happen to be gay or whatever. And I'm like, what? Like, I don't just happen to be. I am. I
Yeah.
just am. When Niall DeMarco won America's Next Top Model, Tyra Banks was like, "You didn't win this because you're deaf. You won this because you're a model, and you just so happen to be deaf." And I just remember watching and being like, "That's a weird thing to say.
That's a weird way to put it.
That's a weird way to put it." Anyways, we digress.
Yeah.
And in fact, that's our outro music. So we're gonna take a little break. We're gonna come back with some research.
Yeah.
Yeah, woo woo. We'll be right back.
Be right back.
And we are back.
Yep.
All right, y'all. So we are in the second half of this gorgeous podcast in our gorgeous new format. And I'm going to start us off. So I was really like actually a little stumped when it came to doing research about this movie because I was like, there's so many things happening with so many people with so many characteristics and oddities and quirks and all of that goodness.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually decided to start with um the idea of blackmail. And so the psychology of blackmail, which then took me down a rabbit hole of the psychology of the false confession.
Mm.
And so I found this great article 2005 by Jesse Baring and Todd Shackelford about the false confession in like interrogation. So like police interrogation practices and different things like that. So anybody who's taken like a intro to psych class or a social psych class, like there's always a topic on like eyewitness testimony and like whether it's very good or like forced confessions or like tampering with like the quality of like people's memories and things like that. But what I really hadn't done a lot in is like understanding false confession and why like how the police are able to get someone to confess to a crime that they have never committed.
Mm-hmm.
It's a real thing, and it really
Oh
happens.
yeah,
It
yeah.
happens like quite a bit.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that they start talking about is just like something as simple as like waiving your Miranda rights, right? So if someone chooses not to waive their Miranda rights, um, there's a weird double-edged sword here. So sometimes people will choose to waive their Miranda rights because they don't want to look suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't talk with a
I have
lawyer
nothing to
present.
hide.
I have nothing to hide. I don't need a lawyer. I don't need whatever, right? And the flip side sometimes is they don't want to seem suspicious. And so sometimes the police will play on that in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Or if somebody does ask for their Miranda, like to like hold their Miranda rights or whatever the legal term is. I'm not a doctor of that. Um, the police will then assume guilt. So it is a real thing that they're like doing. Don't think too hard about this. If you're just get a lawyer, no matter what. If you're talking to the police, get a lawyer. Just get a lawyer. Um, anyways, and so police often will use like tactics concerning evidence, like good cop, bad cop, right? So they try to elicit like a familiarity to then make people feel safe in order to get them to confess. Um, and so like when we think about it, right, like for the most obvious reasons, right, it seems counterintuitive that anybody would ever like confess to something, even if they're guilty, right, that you would just like straight up be like, it was me, right, like
Mm-hmm.
even if you've done the thing. But what what people are starting to think is that certain things um might motivate uh people to confess. The urge to confess, of course it is real, but like what takes them there? So in some studies they've argued that confession is like a preemptive strategy so that it reduces the like moral offense of what you've done, right? So if you're guilty, that you'd confess like quickly just to like show remorse so that the sort of social group, the community around
Right. The
you,
guilt is killing you and
the guilt is killing
yeah.
you, you want to show that like you're sorry for what you've done. um and like anxiety of course like would precipitate that kind of
Mm-hmm.
confession. um and that like the recourse is just that it might have a positive effect on how you're viewed by different things. I actually, as an aside, was watching Law and Order with my mom yesterday, and they were doing the thing where like the guy was saying he's not guilty, and they were like, if he pleads guilty, we'll lower the charges to like whatever, whatever, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually was watching it and I was like, Mom, this is so messed up. Like, why do we have a system that's
Mm-hmm.
like, you know what, it would actually save us time if you just said you did it, and then so we'll make it less if you did it.
Right.
And it's like the person's just as dead. Like it what? Like that.
Right.
Anyways, and like also just being like, look, if you're gonna, especially with how corrupt our justice system is, like telling people like, listen, you're not gonna get off on this one, so you might as well take the plea. And like it just feels so wrong. Anyways, that's an aside. Because I'm just like a really caring person and I just like think about justice a lot.
There's so many factors that,
Yeah.
like, because I mean, you're talking about false confessions. So then there's like, does the person have something to actually hide or not?
Right.
That's like one factor. There's
Right.
also like, what is it? I'm sure you'll talk about this, but like suggestibility or impression,
Yes.
like being
Yes.
impressionable.
Yes. Yeah, so one of the interesting things, I am going to talk about some impressionability stuff. But also, so one of the interesting things is that like innocent people, um like the fear of punishment is part of what sort of like um gets there, right? So if you're innocent and you're afraid that the punishment will be really, really bad, a false confession might be like an adaptive strategy here because of exactly those things that I was saying, right? These plea
Mhm.
deals or this like just the impressionability, these different things. Again, memory is actually very tamperable. So
Mhm.
there are ways in which people have like been forced, have confessed to things and almost kind of believe that they may have somehow been culpable in different situations. Um, but the thing is like a lot of what this article comes down to, which I really love, is take sort of an evolutionary approach to it.
Mhm.
So understanding that like through human history in different ways there have been juries, basically like your peers decide your fitness and your right to exist within the community and the communal space. So like this sort of like the more impressionable you are and the more like you fear the sort of community view of you could get you to sort of cooperate in a way that like is kind of strange. And
Well,
so
there's also a lot of like evolutionary benefits to being perceived well, right?
mhm,
So like
exactly.
there is a personal gain to be had by having a good reputation.
Yeah. And so like observers are, people who are seen guilty are more likely to believe that recidivism is possible,
Mhm.
or essentially that like the person, or not recidivism is when you reoffend, but that what's the word?
Rehabilitation.
Rehabilitation. Thank you. That rehabilitation is possible, right? And so that the person who's saying they've done it has suffered enough through feeling ashamed, and that promotes forgiveness. There's sort of this ancestral view that that uh, by sort of denying one's guilt, even if one was innocent, one might actually have like a more calamitous impact on like their own community relationships. If people like had totally uncompromising false beliefs. So like if other people are constantly saying it and saying it, saying it, you're now like it's just easier to go with what everyone is saying rather than being the one who constantly is sort of like poking the bear. So
Yeah.
a sort of similar but not the same kind of like evolutionary like cooperative thing.
Hmm.
But one of the things though is that it shows that like confession, as they say, can serve as a signal of commitment to others because it reduces the likelihood of defection from the relationship. So if you're confessing, then you're actually saying like I'm invested in you, I'm invested in this space. Um, and so like confessing, people essentially innocents can find themselves increasingly influenced by authority figures who are priming them to all of these things with they often use fabricated details, and they do things to like get them to sign a confession. So normally when people would confess something, like the safest person for you to confess something to is a priest, right? Because it's anonymous or whatever, maybe a therapist or like a close family member.
Hmm.
um, these two actually, because they're evolutionary psychologists, actually tie this to like genetic fitness, meaning the
Mm.
people that are most invested in your ability to continue to procreate are therefore the safest to hold this sensitive information.
Yeah, that makes
Um,
sense.
and so essentially what they're saying though is that the police, by playing this good cop, bad cop, they're essentially like using this heuristic to adopt like a familial role to the people who are confessing. So by seeming like I'm your friend, I'm here to help you, it leads even further into this idea. So these interrogation tactics, are successful.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned it before too, right? Like they're these symbols of these people represent an authority, an established justice system, an established system that is can be increasingly hard for someone to deny, even if they are innocent. They
Yeah,
want to still be a member of this system that's
yeah,
governed by these individuals and these authority figures. And authority figures can often be people we trust because we benefit or believe we benefit socially from participating in the system.
yeah, yeah. So essentially, never talk without a lawyer present. That's
Well, I mean, I think, yeah, it's a bigger conversation too about like post-truth society, right? Like the truth
yeah,
doesn't matter in some ways. What matters is being accepted and being safe. And like that, if people don't have those, if they're not accepted, if they're not feeling safe, like truth doesn't matter as
yeah,
much.
yeah. If you are not part of a community,
Hmm.
we are social animals.
Hmm.
We are creatures of communal spaces. And it's the scariest thing is being completely rejected by it.
Yeah, that actually is a beautiful. Do you have more that you want to talk
No,
about
that's
that?
it.
It's like a
I'll have something at the
beautiful,
end.
yes, but it's a beautiful segue into kind of what I researched,
Oh,
which
good.
is social interactions and how they can impact your cognitive abilities.
Yeah.
And so essentially, when we think about social interactions, we tend to think of pro social behavior like cooperation, altruism, things like that.
Right.
But deception and lying is also,
Yeah.
it takes two people
Yeah.
one person has to lie and one person has to be lied to. And so it really begs this question of like, is lying bad? And like, what kind of bad, right? Like, because there's certainly, deception can increased risks of being rejected from a social
Yeah,
group, right? There
totally.
are studies that, high rates of lying are associated with peer rejection, with conduct problems, with, kind of other antisocial behaviors that are very problematic
Yeah,
and would remove, delinquent behavior. And so, there's very real justifications for why, like, we think lying is bad. We don't want to teach it to our children.
yeah,
But so I did look at basically what lying looks like and how it impacts cognitive abilities in both children and adults. And there is like a very real kind of rationality for why just all types of sociality might
yeah,
benefit cognition. Um, and even though most studies look at cooperation and altruism, I'm sure those are easier to
totally.
like get
Yeah,
funded.
yeah,
Because if your thesis is like lying makes you smarter, it's like not
yeah.
it's not as fun.
That's what my thesis was about. Just kidding. I'm lying.
Oh my gosh, that was so good. No, but there's been a lot of like correlational studies that have looked at young children who have relatively strong executive function, theory of mind skills, right? So
Oh,
theory
yeah.
of mind, which is something that's developed around 3 or 4 years old, but really being able to understand that what goes on in your head is not the same thing as what goes on in
Yeah.
somebody else's head.
Theory of mind is
Um,
the thing that is sort of like most famously like not present in like people with autism. So they can't think what
mhm.
the other person's thinking. Right? It's a very specific
Yeah,
thing
it's
and
like
a
a
weird the
perspective
wording for it
taking.
is such a strange. Yeah, it should just be called perspective taking.
Yeah, it
The
should.
concept of theory of mind, I hate the title. But anyway, sorry,
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah. But basically there's some correlational studies. Young children who have strong executive function and
Uh-huh.
strong theory of mind skills are more likely to tell lies
Yeah.
and are better at maintaining the lies they've told.
Uh-huh.
And they're faster at learning how to lie. And what we see in adults, I'm kind of like going back and forth, but what we see in
Yeah, yeah.
adults, right? So we see social interaction requires complex cognitive abilities, right?
Yeah.
You have to track
Totally.
others changing mental states.
Yeah.
You have to manage distractions, from what's going on in the environment. You have to pursue goals. You have to solve problems. You have to engage in turn taking. And
Yeah.
so it's very plausible that, all forms of social interaction can um, improve your cognitive abilities. And, something about executive function specifically, which is something I studied in grad school. So that's like, we're talking about working memory, right? So,
Yeah.
like, keeping things in mind to accomplish tasks, updating that information as new information becomes available,
Yeah.
um, like shifting from one task to another, inhibition. So, like, maintaining your focus on something while like inhibiting, distractions,
Uh-huh.
or just like impulse control, right? Of
Right.
like being able to keep your eye on the prize, essentially.
Yeah.
And so that's all kind of under this umbrella of executive function.
Yeah.
And there's like older theories that said this is, you're born with this. This is like a very static kind of trait.
Uh-huh.
You can't really, everyone has this kind of trait level executive
Yeah,
function.
on the IQ test, one of the scales is executive function, and IQ tests are supposed to be stable from about the age
Mm-hmm.
of 7. So even if you like as you age, like the idea of your capability for executive functioning is considered within psychology broadly to be a stable construct.
Yes.
Supposed
But
to be.
right. There is some, more recent evidence that suggests, at least some dimension or part of this, it can be kind of up regulated, down regulated, or up
Totally.
regulated with other kinds of tasks, or, other kinds of interventions, or,
Right.
things that you might do. Mindfulness is one of them. That's what I studied. But short-term social interactions, there's been some evidence that show that, that can be as beneficial as like playing some kind of cognitively taxing like brain game or something. And so this Ibarra and colleagues, this paper in 2011 looked at, this is in adults. They looked at different tasks and different forms of social interaction.
Uh-huh.
And basically they first looked at just, um, a getting to know you kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
um, and a cooperative kind of task, and also a competitive task.
Uh-huh.
And they found that the cooperative tasks were had a better impact on um, cognitive functioning or executive functioning, and kind of boosted executive functioning more than a competitive, right? So their initial
Oh,
kind of
cool. Uh-huh.
their initial findings were that, like, cooperation brings you together, and it's actually more cognitively beneficial than if you're competing with people.
Uh-huh.
But they followed that up with some specific types of competition. And their takeaway from that was, like, if there's a competitive situation where you are perspective taking,
Uh-huh.
and you are like, one of them was like a mind reading exercise where you're trying to guess if the other person's lying or not.
Uh-huh.
Another one is you're like pretend you're playing this kind of Wall Street game where you're trying to like be an investor, and then like you have an opponent.
Uh-huh.
Um, and they were given different instructions, like try to understand your opponent and take their perspective or not. And so they found that if there was like some perspective taking involved,
Uh-huh.
that even with like um, competitive games, even ones involving lying, there's benefits to cognitive performance. And that
Right,
kind of
wow.
reminded me of this movie though,
Yeah.
because they are doing that throughout the course of the movie, is like getting to know each other's dirt and motivations. And there's, they're not exactly getting along, but
Right.
they're also trying to work cooperatively towards figuring out who's killing everyone.
Right.
And so even though there's a lot of lying that's going on because of the way that they are socially interacting with each other, we could say that their cognitive abilities are probably boosted throughout as they're on their way to jail
As
for
they're
the
on their
murder.
way.
Um, but the other study that I thought was really funny, it was not funny, but like looking at this in young children
Yeah.
who are just at that age of like not quite knowing how to lie yet.
Totally.
And they took these children and taught them this kind of hide and seek game. And basically, they played with an adult. They
Uh-huh.
had a treat or like, something yummy in one of their
Snack.
hands. And they had an adult opponent who had one chance to like guess which hand the yummy treat was in. So if they lied, then there was a lot to gain, right? That they could
Uh-huh.
keep that treat. If they told the truth, there was their disadvantage, right? They would lose the
Yeah.
treat. And so they actually controlled for baseline ability to deceive. So they had like all of these children do that. Any children who kind of like inherently were lying because in this game were like not part of the study.
Uh-huh.
All the children who just like it didn't occur to them to lie yet were randomized to two conditions. So one was they were taught how to lie,
Uh-huh.
and the trick of the game, right? Which is like, if you just tell them the other hand, like you'll get to keep the treat. And then another condition where they weren't given any instructions on like how to
Yeah, yeah.
win the game. And so they did some executive functioning testing and theory of mind testing before and after they played this game for like 4 days in a row.
Oh my God.
And they found that these children in the experimental condition who were taught to lie, who did not initially know how to lie, significantly improved their executive functioning and theory of mind skills more than the control condition. And so, it's really interesting because, even though you're like, kids don't lie, like that's not good. And there are some risks there, right? Which I said before, like there,
Sociopathy.
yeah, there's some, even like underlying, like high rates of lying underlying some forms of bullying, or just
Yeah.
like, peer rejection. That there are some like cognitive benefits to lying. And so I thought that that was really interesting because it's like, should you teach your kids to lie? No, but also like
I mean,
it's
like,
not.
it is like lying is uh sort of an additional layer of thinking. So like especially if you've now lying is essentially like lying sorry, lie telling a lie is essentially placing uh like a filter over the world where you have to remember what you've sort of like added to the real
Mm-hmm.
picture, right? You've
Mm-hmm.
got
You have
this
to keep
extra
two
thing.
stories straight.
So you have to keep two stories straight. I actually just watched The Mole on Netflix
Oh, is it
and
good?
I really enjoyed it. I mean, like it's such a trippy show because you know someone is lying the whole time.
Right.
And so people really like go into this like double bluff where there's people being like, no, I want people to think I'm the mole because if people think I'm the mole, then they're going to guess I'm the mole when they take the test. And if they guess wrong on the test, then they go home. So like
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm not the mole, so I want them to think I am. And then it's like this whole thing where like so then you see people like sabotaging games and stuff and you're like, "But are you but is it you? But is it you though?"
But does it matter in the case of like they get ahead in the game, whether or not they're the mole? Like, it's very interesting.
It's very interesting. I mean, so I watched the 10 episode season really just to watch the last 15 minutes of the last episode and be like, "What did they do? How did the
Oh,
mole mess
yeah,
it
that's where
up?"
they lay it all out, right?
That's where they're like, and look at all the ways that they screwed you over. I'm using a non-gendered pronoun very intentionally because I
I
don't want
mean,
to
this was
spoil
a
the mole for
show. This was
anybody.
also like an actual network show, right?
Yeah,
Is
it
it the
used to
same
be
exact
the
thing?
early 2000s. Same concept.
Okay,
Anyways,
okay.
lying, right?
Yeah.
And so like even just watching the show is trippy because you really have to think so much
You have to
about
maintain, and there's the task switching too, right? What's the truth? What's the lie? Like,
yeah,
which story is it? Which, and all the threads. But there's
yeah,
also like pro-social form. We talked about this, like white lies, right? Or like keeping the
yeah,
peace. Like,
yeah.
it's not morally black and white.
It's not morally black and white. I mean, there are good lies in the sense of like, does it add does it improve someone's life to have this small sort of thing, right? Like
Yeah.
this small or does it like sometimes the whole truth is not what any of us wants. I would rather someone, maybe tell me they're just so busy. They're just so busy and I get to be like, "Oh, I guess I'm not a priority," than have them be like, "Here's the thing. I think you're hideous and I never want to go on a date with you ever again." Like
Yeah,
I don't need to
true.
know the full details. Just tell me you're
Yeah.
busy. Like that
Yeah.
sounds fine.
And again, I am sorry I did that to you.
Yeah, here's the thing. I I'll never get over it and I will this is your punishment. Is you're forced to
This
to
is
podcast
podcast.
with me for all eternity. Um well, so my last little thing that I also wanted to look into because I knew there was a little bit of research on this and I just thought it was interesting.
It's like a real
This
phenomenon.
is a real phenomenon. So my last thing is I looked into like why do women love true crime so much?
Yeah.
Because
Ladies be crazy.
it is a real thing. There is so much spooky content out there for women.
I
I mean,
mean, and well, there's also like the preponderance of like uh social media like love for these serial killers.
yes,
What is
yes.
that?
I mean, with the and I this research that I pulled is not serial specific.
Mm-hmm.
It's true crime sort of generalized. So I found an article from the journal Social Psychology and Personality Science from 2010 by Amanda Vicari and Chris Fraley, not Farley, Fraley,
Mm-hmm.
R. Chris Fraley.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, called Captured by True Crime. Why are women drawn to tales of R word, M word, and serial killers?
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
because this is YouTube, I have to censor
Right,
those words a
right,
little
right.
bit.
It took
Um,
me a second, but I got there.
R word, M word, and serial killers. I think I
Yeah.
can say that. It'll
Yeah.
probably make us pop if we're in the algorithm because I said serial killers. I'll say it again, serial killers. Um, but so in this article, I thought it was really interesting. So they you know in their background they sort of talk about this idea of this multifaceted understanding here because okay, we have a real fascination. We obviously they're sort of theorizing already that women have sort of more fascination in murder than men. One of the things they start with is saying that men are actually more likely to be murdered than women.
Mm,
Men are more likely to engage in violent interactions, which are more likely to result in murder. So when we
right.
think about like the number one type of murder is gun violence in this
Mm-hmm.
country, men are more likely to die by proactive, intentional um, means.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's interesting is that in terms of the media that we consume, so this isn't even about murder, this is about true crime.
Right.
So in terms of true crime, we actually have a vast uh number of like the vast majority is true crime is about violence against women,
Mm-hmm.
which obviously a single paper cannot like determine like why is that, but
Right.
it tries to. So they did a series of studies. So they actually did 5 studies. In the first 2 studies, the authors conducted a study of reader reviews to look at like the book choices that that women and men choose. And they found in these first 2 that women are more drawn to true crime stories and men are more attracted to other violent genres like war, like
Mm.
zombies, things like that. So, which like I think anecdotally we probably are like, yeah, okay,
Yeah,
that
that tracks.
that tracks. And then in the studies 3, 4, and 5, they manipulated different characteristics across true crime stories to figure out like what do women actually find appealing. And so, they sort of use these like evolutionary perspectives on aggression and murder. And so, essentially, what they found is that evolutionarily, people have, as long as humans have existed, so has murder. Shout
Right.
out Cain and Abel.
I was
Um,
just thinking that.
right. Uh, just kidding. We at this podcast do not believe that Cain and Abel were the first 2 children in the world. But
Speak for yourself.
yeah, sorry, my bad. Blah, that's terrible. But that like even something is there was the Iceman that was found like frozen, that was supposed to be like 5,300 years old,
Hmm.
and like they discovered when they did the autopsy like cause of death was murdered by arrowhead. Like you know what I mean? Like
Right, right,
people are killing people.
right,
Date unknown and unnecessary. Like
right.
anyways, so there are like real like evolutionary like underpinnings here. Like murder is as old as humans are. So in terms
Mm-hmm.
of like why would women find this more compelling is they had a few theories that sort of lined up with what they found. One is that women fear becoming the victim of a crime more so than men do. Which is important, I think,
Mm-hmm.
to be thinking about, right? So the idea in this then would be um that women, because they're experiencing fear, want to sort of search the media to understand like possible uh scenarios for themselves, right? To learn more about the sort of the problems, despite the fact that like actually men are more likely than women to be the victim of a crime, period.
Mm-hmm.
um and that women experience far more fear of crime, particularly of certain crimes such as R word, uh, which occur obviously more frequently for women. Um, Other researchers think that the media is largely to blame for a lot of this, in that the crimes that we focus on in the media tend to be where women are victimized.
Right.
I actually heard an interesting piece. I read an interesting piece online a few years ago, and I can't remember where. It was like a Vulture or like a Vox thing that was like, we need to stop telling stories about sexual assault that are fictional, in the
Mm-hmm.
sense that it was like by assaulting your fictional characters, you continue this violence against women. Like it perpetuates a lot of this like fear. Not
Mm-hmm.
that like and again, the person who was writing this was not saying like we need to stop talking about sexual assault, but what they were saying is like that there is still a traumatization that occurs when you take like a character in a TV show or a film or a novel that you've developed an attachment to, and then or even that you haven't developed an attachment to, and you uh that character is assaulted is its own form of assault. And so I do think there is something like really important in the media to be just thinking about like what's happening when you're telling this story, and how does it disrupt one's feeling of safety, particularly with these characters that you're also, I mean, not again, not that it's okay when you're not attached to the character, but like just the sort of preponderance of it like keeps it at the front of the minds of people, particularly women who are scared all the time of this incredibly heinous thing that does happen. I don't know, it's a complicated thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the things that come up for me are like, the media likes to tell stories that are as black and white as possible.
Yes.
And, they really lean into gender stereotypes. Like, I mean, so with women and violence against women, the most common perpetrators of that is men,
Mm-hmm.
not like other women. And
Right.
so, and then there's gender stereotypes about men being physically stronger than women,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
just it allows the news to portray these stories as the sympathetic victim who is a weaker
Yeah.
woman who there was nothing she could do to protect herself, and
Right.
a stronger man who, like it's, I just feel like it's a, as sick as it is to say, like it's like a cleaner narrative
Right.
to kind of like paint the victims as sympathetic. And I think too, to your point though, like it's like this fascination that women have specifically, which is like it's the same reason. Well, there's like the fear response, there's like the entertainment factor of being afraid, and then there's also like and this is just anecdotally, but I'm thinking of SVU specifically, but it's like, okay, taking notes. Like,
Yeah.
is there a preparedness kind of element
Yeah,
here?
there is.
Yeah.
And so in this article they actually talk about two things. One, um understanding motive.
Mm-hmm.
So like a part of like sort of the Dahmer stuff or these like serial killer things is like if we watch and like sort of humanize the serial killer in a way, it can reaffirm this like just world hypothesis, right? That like the
Totally.
reason this person is doing those bad things is because blank,
Yeah.
right?
A need to understand.
A need to
Yeah.
understand the motive for
Right.
why someone would do it because it makes us feel safer to know like, oh well, I would never blah blah blah, right? We've talked about this when we've talked about sexual assault in the past, right? This just world hypothesis is what tells people like is what has people saying the first question is like, what was she wearing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like by blaming the victim you're separating yourself, so by
Right.
understanding the motive of the killer you're keeping yourself safer.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one is exactly what you said in terms of like taking notes. The last one is, by studying these tactics, maybe it's possible to use these as survival tips
Mm-hmm.
should these things happen. And so
Right.
part of what they're essentially saying is like, because this is so tied to our own like drive to stay alive and the drive of women in particular to stay alive, it's so egocentric to
Mm-hmm.
it's so like aligned with your brain is like yum facts about murder, yay,
Right.
like it
Right.
feels soothing.
Yeah.
However, like there's a lot of evidence that shows that like spending a lot of your time thinking about murder and true crime actually increases your anxiety
Of course.
overall.
I mean, it's
Right.
you're increasing your attention to it, your fixation, you're thinking about it more. I mean, for sure it feeds, it's a vicious cycle.
It's a vicious cycle. And if you think about it, women are the problem. I'm just kidding. That's a joke for those who couldn't see
Is
my face.
that was their conclusion statement?
That was their concluding statement was
Yeah.
it's women's fault. They actually just blamed shopping. I don't know why. They said it's shopping's fault. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean it's wild just to think about. And it is such like a phenomenon, especially in the last like decade. There's been such an
Mm-hmm.
uptick in like true crime. I mean, even like in the podcasting world, shows like My Favorite Murder,
Mm-hmm.
um, which in a way we kind of use some of that format on our own podcast, where it's like, hey,
Yeah.
we're gonna do a thing, and now you share your thing that you're excited about, and I'll share my thing that I'm excited about, and then have a great day. We'll see you next
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And we don't research together. We research separate, and so we can tell each other about the things that we like. But that podcast, I've listened to probably like 80 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's fun.
Yeah.
There's just such a huge, it's such a huge thing. And while Clue is not true crime, it's truly criminal if you haven't seen it.
I mean, how like that needs to be the end of our talking about Clue. That
I
needs
think
to
it
be the
does.
last thing that's
I
said.
think it probably is.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a move.
What a movie. That was so great. And okay, so let's pivot into, I guess, next week's, right?
Yeah, let's talk about next week's movie. I don't know what it
Okay.
is.
You don't, and I chose it, and I definitely did choose it before. No, I'm serious. I really I did choose a movie. It's a good movie. I didn't just Google popular movie right now.
Popular movie.
Honestly though, I feel like this might come up if you were to Google that. But
All right.
okay, so this is from 1991. There's a few taglines.
Okay. 91. All right. Ooh.
Yeah. I'll start with one of them's too vague. It's like not fun. I'll start with this one that's like not super obvious. To live would be an awfully big adventure.
Hook.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a line from Peter Pan.
Yeah.
I think it's to die would be an awfully big adventure, is what Peter Pan says in the original book.
IMDb said
no, that's the hook line. You're right, because it's their twist.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, because Peter Pan is so like rigid in this,
right.
like what Robin Williams is so he needs to live.
Right.
In the book, I do believe Peter says to die would be an awfully big adventure.
Referencing books, this is a movie, man.
Sorry about it. This is a movie podcast. I apologize. This is a background behind me.
Yeah, that's not real.
They're
all cardboard.
My childhood books. Oh my gosh, so excited.
I wanted to do a Robin Williams movie, and I don't know. I feel like there's some themes here. There's some stuff.
There's some stuff. Some like fun little things. A cute little Phil Collins cameo and a Glenn Close cameo to look forward to. And yeah, I'm super excited.
Yeah. Yay. You got it real fast. So
I got it real fast.
So
we'll just vamp. All right. Well, y'all, this has been another episode of Real Psych. I am Dr. JD Barton.
And I am Dr. Joanna Whitkin.
Please, if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If you're listening, hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening. Tell a friend.
Yeah, leave comments, leave reviews. Give us 5 stars.
Please.
Send us messages on Insta.
Yeah. And we'll be back next week with another episode of Real Psych.
Real Psych.